You are listening to Proof Text, a Glossa House podcast exploring Scripture and all things related to it. New episodes are released daily. For more information, check out glossahouse.com and subscribe to our channels on Spotify and YouTube. Welcome and enjoy.
I was standing today in the dark tool shed. The sun was shining outside, and through the crack at the top of the door, there came a sunbeam. From where I stood, that beam of light, with the specks of dust floating in it, was the most striking thing in the place. Everything else was almost pitch black. I was seeing the beam, but not seeing things by it. Then I moved so that the beam fell on my eyes. Instantly, the whole previous picture vanished. I saw no tool shed and, above all, no beam. Instead, I saw, framed in the irregular cranny at the top of the door, green leaves moving on the branches of a tree outside, and beyond that, 90-odd million miles away, the sun. Looking along the beam and looking at the beam are very different experiences.
Welcome to the Christ and Classics podcast, where we read classics in light of Christ. My name is Devin Wilkins, and this is Colton Moore, and today we are in episode 2 of the second season of today we'll be looking at meditation in the Toolshed by C.S. Lewis. It's an essay that we found especially gripping and helpful as we think about reading Lewis as well as all other books. Colton, you just read the first couple paragraphs. What do you think of this essay? Would you like to kick us off?
Yeah, I first came about this essay as I was reading, not too long ago, Michael Ward's Planet Narnia. In the first 50 pages, Dr. Ward provides a really fantastic summary of his thesis and C.S. Lewis as a literary critic. And Dr. Ward lays out that fairly early on in Lewis's life and career, he came across a philosopher, Alexander. What's his first name?
He calls him Alexander a lot.
Yeah, I know. Forget the guy's first name. Anywho, this guy taught Lewis, says Dr. Ward, the difference between enjoying something and contemplating something. The experience of being immersed in something versus looking from the outside at it and describing it from the outside. And this essay by Lewis is kind of a variation on that concept. And
experiential knowing versus analytical knowing.
Right. Yeah, it's real provocative imagery that Lewis says can be applied to a whole host of aspects in our lives, and I think he's spot on. He starts off like the whole idea of this essay is centered around this metaphor of this tool shed, and he's sitting in a dark tool shed. A man is, and he's looking at this beam, and he notices that there are specks in the beam, and it's really the only thing he can see in this tool shed. And Lewis is saying there's a difference between knowing that beam exists by looking at it in its brightness with its dust speck particles floating, and then stepping inside of it and having your sight illuminated by the light that is the beam. And he takes that metaphor and applies it throughout a variety of different aspects of life within this short little 2-page essay. One of the first examples he gives is in the succeeding paragraph, for example, and he talks about a man being in love with a girl. He says that for this man who meets this young girl, he says, quote, "The whole world looks different when he sees her. Her voice reminds him of something he has been trying to remember all his life, and 10 minutes casual chat with her is more precious than all the favors that all the women in the world could grant. He is, as they say, in love." So
then becomes a scientist.
Right. The boy is in the beam. He's enjoying his female companion. But then comes a scientist from the outside examining, as a scientist should, this boy with his female companion. Quote, Lewis says, "Now comes a scientist and describes this young man's experience from the outside. For him, it is all an affair of the young man's genes and a recognized biological stimulus. That is the difference between looking along the sexual impulse and looking at it." And so there's two different kinds of knowledge there. The knowledge that the boy experiences with his female companion himself, and then the kind of knowledge that the scientist looks at from outside. The former is what Lewis would call enjoying. The second is what he would call contemplating, or looking along or looking at.
Right.
So,
yeah, that's good, and that's really helpful overview. And I love it. It is kind of revolutionary, and it's so simple. But yeah, Lewis just hits it out of the park with a simple image of, or not only an image, I suppose one of his own experiences being in a toolshed.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and looking along himself in the toolshed. And so what most interests Devin and I about this essay is hey Ben.
Is that one guy that was on
yes.
Was it episode 6 or what was that?
Yes, this is that one guy on episode 6 from the Iliad.
All right.
Hey Ben.
I couldn't tell what that book was.
A big anthology of poems, it looks like.
Nice. He's about to look along.
Oh, really? Yeah, for sure. What was I saying? Oh, yes. What interests us about this essay is its application for our reading and pedagogy. So the question we want to ask about this essay is, how can C.S. Lewis's meditation of a toolshed impact the way that we read and impact the way that we teach great literature? Devin, what do you think?
Yeah. Well, at first blush, I kind of think, well, okay, so which one's better? When I read it, should I just read through and not really think about it and just try to enjoy it? Or similarly, when I teach it, yes,
a book,
a book, any book. Perhaps I should make it more concrete. When I'm reading the Iliad, should I stop and reflect and think, contemplate? Or should I just continue reading and enjoy it? And two different kinds of knowledge come. Which one's better? And that is an impulse that I have, to go, okay, so wait, which one's the right one? And Lewis addresses that in the essay. He basically ends up saying that either or approach is rot. I love that. Yeah. Instead, he advocates for a both and. They're two different kinds of knowledge, and they're both necessary. You can't really say anything about something without knowledge, kind of experiential knowledge of it. But then also, if all you are is a bundle of experiential knowledge, and you never back away and contemplate, I don't know. I can't remember exactly what he says. Maybe you do, Colton, but it's it's kind of like the unexamined life's not worth living. Socrates. You need both, and they both contribute something important.
It's really similar to modern approaches to teaching literature. And in my brief experience, many approaches to teaching books emphasizes looking at the book. You have a certain book, and so what are the first steps that you do? Well, you first identify the author, the author's background,
context,
his historical context, what kind of genre you're dealing with. You're dealing with historical fiction, perhaps even what kind of subgenre you're dealing with, and the various kinds of literary devices the author uses and maybe is prone to use, and analyzing those, and maybe looking at some other examples from other literature in the typical in that time frame, that time era. Maybe if there's any sort of allegorical connections that the author is making with other contemporary, what's the word? Events. Like right now, I'm teaching Animal Farm to 7th graders. Huge. There's tons of fodder for informational texts and non-fictional historical texts about the Russian Revolution, the monarchy being overthrown, and the Soviet Union rising up with Lenin and eventually Stalin knocking out Trotsky, and all that, and how it all relates to Major and Snowball and Napoleon, and all the animals play a part and are like an allegory picture to what actually happened in history. And that's all really good, but it's still just looking at the text.
Well, that's an interesting one, though, Colton, because isn't that why Orwell wrote it? Or the propaganda kind of, like seeking to counter. Well, so here's one thing, Colton, that I would do when I taught literature, and maybe may the Lord bring me back. but one thing that I would do is I would try to give them enough contextual kind of grounding before we go into reading a book, such that they might have at least comparable context or comparable knowledge going into the book that the original audience may have had. So, if it's written to, during the height of the Cold War, and that's a significant fear-inducing moment in world history because this power and that power, and so on and so forth, I'm gonna probably give that to my students at the outset, but it doesn't mean I'm going to like chew it up and spit it out for them.
I think it depends, because there's a certain level of background knowledge and common core knowledge that you have to assume with students relative to their grade level or age. So if you're, for example, if you're about to teach through Romeo and Juliet to 7th graders for the first time, it may be helpful for you to talk about the 16th century Italian cultural climate. I don't necessarily think you have to go big into detail, but it helps when they're talking about rapiers and they're talking about feasting and masquerading with masks, and what is all that about. But my personal preference is to do as little of that as I need to let the book speak for itself. So like with Animal Farm, I haven't told, I've told them that these represent events that have happened in the Russian Revolution, and we're going to get to them. But first, I want them to just hear about Manor Farm and get to know the pigs and the animals and what's happening. And the message speaks for itself without any knowledge of the Russian Revolution. And then when we come back around in the next couple of weeks, when we're about to wrap up the book, we're going to look at the text carefully. So I'm hoping to do a combination of both and currently, where right now we're in the heat of enjoying the book, looking along the book and sensing and feeling and experiencing the injustice, even sometimes the unspeakable injustice. It's hard to explain what they're doing at times with the deception. They're taking half truths and twisting them and using them, and we feel that it's wrong. And then we're going to come back and look at the text. That's my preference. I prefer to do it that way instead of the reverse. Just to let
no. And I think that's my general preference as well. I'm thinking of, and I can see that really working well with middle schoolers who maybe, with a book like Animal Farm, which is pretty accessible regardless of the background. And then you can pull in the background as kind of a, I see, light bulbs start going off. But, like take the Iliad, for example, or something along those lines. You kind of want to understand something of the Greek worldview before you really undertake the Iliad, because otherwise it's a little confusing. And otherwise you end up just tackling them as you come upon them because you're confused. You know what I mean? So I took a minimalist approach. Like, what do I need to communicate minimally at the outset in order to maximize enjoyment and contemplation on the throughout and on the back end? And so I don't know that I really disagree with you, and I'm really intrigued by what you're doing with Animal Farm, because I think that not uniquely, but works significantly better than maybe some others might.
Yeah, I think so. I think the nature of Animal Farm and Orwell's intent for it really lends itself toward this. And even my students, who a few of them are really already interested in the history of World War I, World War II, the Soviet Union, they're already catching on. Like today, they came up to me and were like, "Mr. Moore, I think that Napoleon is Stalin, Snowball is Trotsky."
Nice.
And I think that old Major the Boar Pig has got to be Lenin, and Mr. Jones is what is it, Tsar Nicholas II. And it's
Can
like,
I ask, did you set up did you make that choice of a book based on the history that they're going to be studying, or is that just happenstance?
Happenstance with what? What's your question?
Right. The book that you're reading, does it correspond with the history that they're studying?
Oh, no, just happenstance.
Okay.
Yeah. I wish it'd be sweet. Like Animal Farm would be great to read when you're covering world history of early 20th century, late 19th
because
century.
Now you have to be the English teacher and the history teacher for that for your unit.
Yeah, my whole knowledge is integrated.
That your history teacher at your school is doing a great job.
Yeah, Mr. Starnes. So,
shout out.
Yeah, so like this little essay about the difference between looking along a text and looking at a text. It's easy for us to explain this. Like the very nature of this episode of the podcast is looking at something. We are what are we looking at? We are looking at.
We're looking at a bro looking at something.
Really? And so in this podcast episode, it is impossible for us to look at, it's impossible. Well, is it? Because Lewis brings this circular idea up that whenever you're looking at something, you're like the very act of looking at something is looking along in a certain kind of knowledge. Like as the scientist is looking at the boy with his woman, he is simultaneously looking along in a certain kind of way, in a certain experience of knowledge. So there's like this overlap of looking along and looking at and looking along.
It sounds like Inception.
Yeah. But Lewis's conclusion is that he says we must never allow this rot to begin. This rot of it says looking at is better, is truer. Like the knowledge that we get from looking at something is truer than looking along something. Like
right.
It like to truly love someone is not merely physiological neural pathways being created and matter moving around in the brain and blood flowing. It's true. These things happen when you deeply love someone. But it's true in one sense. But in another sense, it's internal and deeply experiential. I guess. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just thinking back to teaching a little bit that it's worth having these categories that Lewis delineates or clarifies. I mean, they're pretty self-evident categories. Basically knowledge, experiential knowledge, and knowledge about. But it's helpful to have those categories so that you're not only hitting one consistently. As you consider how am I going to go about this with the students, you don't want to only do one over the other. You don't want only story time, but you also don't want only spark notes. You want to immerse your students in the wonder of a story, and you want them always just right ahead of you with their questions and that sort of thing. But then also you want to have real, solid, deep discussions about the text that and the relationship kind of goes both ways. The experience informs the contemplation informs the experience, and back and forth and on it goes. It should be.
Yeah, and Lewis speaks to that in the middle of his essay. He says, quote, a physiologist, for example, can study pain and find out that it is, whatever is means, such and such neural events. But the word pain would have no meaning for him unless he had been inside by actually suffering. If he had never looked along pain, he simply wouldn't know what he was looking at. The very subject for his inquiries from outside exists for him only because he has at least once been inside.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And something beautiful about that is how it points to our finitude as humans. I can't really evaluate the pain from the outside while I'm in it, but I can't successfully evaluate it unless I have been in it. But it's really difficult to do both at the same time, and I take that to be a feature of our finitude. Certainly the Lord is bigger than that, but we are not. We have to. We can't do multiple things at once. We can't be in it and outside of it simultaneously. I appreciate that.
As I was reading Ward's Planet Narnia, I texted you with these thoughts and said, I'm afraid to keep reading this because if I do, like the book is a detailed monograph that looks at Lewis. It's primarily looking at Lewis to keep this language up, and it's uncovering he's convinced me, at least for now, that he's uncovered Lewis's big secret. And I thought, good grief, if I keep reading this book, am I going to be just totally obsessed with looking at Lewis's Chronicles that it drowns out my looking along and enjoying it? Am I going to be so worried about all these undertones of all the secrets in there that Lewis wanted to keep secret that aid to your enjoyment? And whenever we asked him that question, which was basically like,
he was like,
yeah.
He basically said, well, that sounds like a personal problem.
Really? And you know what that said for me? That said for me, like, this this scholar is at such a level that he can take all his life study of Lewis, looking at him and looking at the Chronicles, and yet still bring the two to the contemplation and the enjoyment, the looking at and the looking along together as he's reading the Chronicles. And it's a wonderful encouragement. And
we should
yeah.
I was gonna say we should have warned people before that episode aired that they're spoilers, Susan, and that they might want to make sure they've read the books before they listen to it. Whoops. But I loved his response, and I love his example of being someone who still enjoys amid all of his stepping back and looking at. I found, actually, as I was reading Planet Narnia, that it was very academic, but a page turner. And I just...
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it took me a while to get through a page, but I wasn't stopping, I wasn't going to fall asleep. I had to eventually shift to my Tolkien reading,
Well, like, it was a book that was academic, meaning heavily on the looking at, but yet you were looking along with him as you were looking at. It's really well written and delightful. It's the adjective that it keeps coming back into my mind. It's a delightful book. It's not an easy book, but it's delightful. It's delightful. And I'm very, very thankful for it. And it's a great example of, I think, what Lewis is getting at in this essay. And
can I ask, sorry, I don't want to cut you off.
No.
Can I ask you a question?
Go for it.
We're about to launch into reading the Narnia books in published order. So beginning with Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Oh, yeah. The order.
And the OG. And we're going to take a week to read and discuss each one. So we'll have experienced it over the course of a week, and then we'll come together and just talk about it. So ideally, we'll have looked along the beam, and then we'll look at it together. And I was just curious, at least at this juncture, which Narnian Chronicle have you most enjoyed looking along?
Oh, so easy. So easy. Easy.
And why?
The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. Number 3.
Yeah.
That's a good
one. By far. It's so good. And
far is
I think
relative.
Ward was saying that it was the easiest one for Lewis to write.
It's so good.
In the interview. Yeah.
So good.
Yeah, why do you so easily look along it? Yep.
I guess there's this I think it's the moral themes that are raised up. The moral and theological themes that that hit so well with the gospel and humanity, and it taps into the longing of human beings in general. You see that with Eustace, Eustace Claret Scrub, who nearly deserved his name. Scrub. And he's just a nasty boy. Just a just a naughty, crude. He's the kind of guy who only looks at books. We don't look along them. We read fiction, and I love books about working out and
nonfiction,
books about Beatles, and he scoffs at the Pevensies for their
modern boy. Yeah,
right. He's like the epitome of all that you and I have been saturated with, and probably are going to have to take the rest of our lives unraveling in our own minds and souls, quite frankly. And then he becomes what he is, a dragon, fierce and he's a monster, the monster that he is of modernity. And he meets Aslan, and Aslan strips him of his monstrous skin, and he plunges him into the water. And he comes out, and like at that moment, he's not changed, but he's, in Greek technical terminology or in linguistic terminology, he is in the imperfective tense or the imperfective aspect. He is being changed. That's when he starts. And I guess I just see myself in Eustace as well, where there's hope for Eustace. He's being renewed, and you see that slowly throughout. And it kind of culminates at the beginning of the next one, the Silver Chair, where Eustace and Pole are together, and he's changed, and all the other folks are. And so there's that aspect. And then as they sail eastward and eastward and eastward, especially in the character of Reepicheep, there's this longing of, I want to go to Aslan's country. I'm ready. I want to go. And they get there. Or rather, as they're getting there, there's this dreamy, like, mystical, magical experience where their typical bodily necessities are halted for a moment, because all they need is this water to drink, and things keep getting brighter and brighter, such that you would typically not be able to see, but they can see clearly. And they get to Aslan's country, the Pevensies, and there's a lamb there. And then they ate the best meal of their lives. They were hungry again in the presence of Aslan. And so these themes of longing for something eternal, longing for something that truly satisfies in a real, literal sense, satisfies and keeps on satisfying. The nature of redemption in Eustace, and the beauty of the sea, and I think those are some of the main themes and reasons why I enjoy the Dawn Treader the best.
Yeah, I can tell that you really, really enjoyed it, and you got a lot of enjoyment knowledge from it. Yeah, that's awesome. Your enjoyment makes me enjoy it more. Which it's awesome how it works like that.
And you? I know we're about to wrap up. Tell us your I don't want to say your favorite, but the one that you enjoy the most.
Right. Yeah, lately it's been the Silver Chair. Because I feel like the Silver Chair so closely mirrors kind of life, normal life after Aslan and the Stone Table, but before the final book, when all things come to an end. It captures the deception that we kind of just breathe in amid kind of the prince of the power of the air around us, and the power of of the gospel story. I don't want to say too much in the event that someone hasn't read it yet. It's one of the ones that folks. I find that the Silverchair, Horse and His Boy, and Last Battle tend to be the three that people don't get to. They're the ones I didn't get to until I was an adult. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like I could be, or I am helped as I think alongside those characters a little bit more in regards to how I perceive my own time and live my own life.
Yeah.
In this land where the air's thick.
Silverchair does have the best monologue of the seven, I think. Puddleglum's speech. I stand with Aslan. It's just so good. That's so good.
Yeah.
Even if it is all fake, I'd rather be here than with you. Anyways,
you're telling me that we can make something up better than what you got?
Yeah.
And even if so, well, man, I'll take it.
Well, Devin, man, I'm really glad that we decided to talk about this little essay by Lewis, meditation in a tool shed. Delightful little essay. I'm gonna link it in the show notes in the description for anyone to find. You can find it easy on an easy free PDF online, and so I'm gonna just link one, and it's wonderful. Devin, I look forward to next week recording The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. In a couple of weeks also, we have another recording with our good buddy Keith Kresge, and we're going to talk about two other Lewis essays on democratic education and Screwtape Proposes a Toast. And if I would assume most of the folks who are listening to this, which is not many, don't know our good buddy Keith Kresge, but I honestly, Devin, I consider our good friend Keith one of the sharpest and most refining men that I've ever met. Like he's the guy in class who you don't just listen to, but you listen to what he tells you. Like you listen to what he says, and then you listen to his critiques of you because it's going to make you better. He's a really sharp dude, and he just finished listening and reading all of Lewis's
corpus.
And so we asked him, Keith, give us 2 or 3 of your favorite essays. We'll read them with you, and we'll have a little roundtable discussion. So
I'm really looking forward to that. That'll be rich.
It's going to be really good. So,
are there any other interviews that are Lewis specific? So we've done Ward. There will be Mr. Kresge, and are there any others, or is it just those 2 and the Narnia Chronicles?
I don't think so. I think we've got Andrew Kern coming on in March, but I think we're going to talk about the Iliad in that one. Maybe we can sneak some Lewis in.
Maybe we can talk about the Odyssey a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe Kern could kick off season 3.
Boom. Love it. You know what else I love?
Hold on. We're now developing a habit in light of this episode. This is worth saying. We have a habit of contemplating before the episodes of enjoying come. Oh, I don't know about that.
Yeah, and so, well, Devin, it's been good.
Let's enjoy some rock.
Let's go, Micah. Bring it on.
Yes, sir.
Interested in growing your ancient language skills but not sure where to start? Glossa House can help. From illustrated readers and short stories to lexicons and grammars, Glossa House offers a variety of resources for beginning, intermediate, and experienced ancient language learners. Head to glossahouse.com today. Glossa House, language resources for the global community.